Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And by daily, I mean this is for yesterday, when I didn't manage to get it done because I'm an idiot. Actually, I'm not an idiot. Well, yeah, I am, but mainly I had to ship out tons of CDs yesterday. That took longer than expected, and it was dark already, and I was tired and whatnot. So yeah, if you want to make my life miserable and ensure that I don't record videos on time, go order some Rygar CDs. They're fresh in now and they're great. Anyway, I could link them down below. Maybe I will. Anyway. Not my point. My point is this is about chapters 7 and 8 in Stonewielder. So we'll have chapters 9 and 10 on Monday, and chapters 11 and 12 and the epilogue on Tuesday. And we'll then start our Scepter Throne on Wednesday. I presume. We'll see. Point is, I just realized that if we continue this way, we'll be done with all of the novels in the Malazan Empire before the end of the year, which means that in like 1 year I've managed to talk about every single book in the Malazan universe except the Beauchelin and Corporal Brooch novellas, because they are not available in audio. And yeah, maybe I'll come up with a way to deal with that and, get an audiobook, get an ebook and have like a screen reader, like butcher them for me or something. We'll see. But if that doesn't happen, I'll still have like done all the Malazan stuff in 1 year, which I think calls for some sort of celebration. I have no idea what I'll do yet. If you have any suggestions how to actually wrap up the Malazan year thing, let me know, and maybe we'll come up with something really cool. We could do like a live stream or whatever. We'll figure it out. Anyway, in case the suddenly warm October sun will overheat the camera, let's better start before it's too late, shall we? Ooh, cheers. So, what should we talk about for chapters 7 and 8? There's a lot of action going on in general. Like this one, the Stonewielder is another rather action-heavy book compared to some of the others, by which I mean there's a lot just keeps on happening continuously. We are mostly dealing with the battle around the river, with the dynamics within the army of Greymane, within Greymane's army on the one hand, and the dynamics within the so-called defending army, the former 6th army that is now gone over to the lady on the other hand. We have that kind of dynamic going on there. We have events around Investor Bracoon and what is going on in the hinterlands, and our third main thing that keeps going on is obviously events at the Stormguard, at the wall, storm wall, that is where things are slowly escalating. And well, of course, the ongoing thing where Kiska and totally not Leoman are looking for Tayshran. That's like the fourth big one. And I'll try to, keep things in a sort of way that makes sense. But we'll see how that works. So, one thing that I wanted to look at is the character of Greymane, because we see more of him. And now, one thing, obviously, is that Greymane, we've only seen him as a viewpoint character in Kellenved's Reach for a while, where he's a he's loyal to his men. He's more of a leader of men than like an actual general or anything like that. And I feel that's a big difference. He leads like a group of mercenaries there, what you might call that is very much built on personal loyalty. And that is, of course, something that we see a lot with the beginning of the Malazan Empire, with all those glorified war leaders that we have there. We have Dujak, we have Whiskey Jack, we have Dasem Ultor, of course, and we have Greymane. maybe a few more, but all of that, because it starts out as a gang of bandits, basically, is built on personal loyalty, on personal responsibility, people that lead from the front, more or less, that are like part of the ranks and don't sit somewhere in the back to guide the battles. And Greymane is part of that old school style of command. He, for whatever reasons, which may have been about his loyalty, his honesty, and all of that, he got ousted by power-hungry people within the usurped by power-hungry people within the Malazan army, Sixth Army, when the whole first invasion of Fist ended, and that has left, like, that has damaged him, his personality, I would say, because what it does is, like, that loyalty that I spoke about that you have with those old generals, with Greymane and so forth, goes both ways. It's like they give their everything for their men, and the men give their everything for them. Men being like gender neutral here, like they're soldiers, I think I should say. And that trust can be broken by both sides. And in Raymane's case, it gets broken by his soldiers when they kick him out. Well, some of his officers, actually, but you know what I mean. And that damages, like, him a lot, and we see that when he in the way he works or doesn't work as a soldier now, when he falls back into that pattern. Devileth kind of understands that when she's like, yeah, he fears that the same thing is happening to him again. And obviously the captain, the Fist Relish Kelteth, is that his name? Fist Relish, anyway, who was part or not part of that first betrayal of Greymane, is there to reinforce the paranoia of Greymane. And that, I feel, is something that we see here. We saw it at the beginning of the book already, when he's basically an alcoholic and depressed and whatnot in Falar. And I really appreciate the way that this is handled, because what it does is it shows that Greymane is a damaged character. He is obviously a extremely courageous fighter, seems to be mostly honest, but he's not the pure hero here. We see that a lot with these elements, these undertones, that there is some sort of madness going on there. Or madness is probably too much, but very strong emotions that are sometimes overruling his judgment. Instead of, like, actually talking it out with Relish, he just, like, treats the guy like shit, and that's not good, And it is very clear that like, these emotions are clouding his judgment, and that damages, actually hurts his soldiers this time round. So through not being able to heal the damage of that first betrayal of his men or like his former army, his former soldiers in the Sixth Army, this time round, he is threatening to betray the trust of his men by letting emotions overcome his judgment in a lot of ways. And that is what we slowly see happening here, which, makes for a lot of tragedy, and once again it fits into the whole pattern, one of those whole patterns that we see a lot of in the Malazan world, that being that, events have ongoing ramifications and will impact stuff that will happen later on, and all of that. So, what else is there to talk about? Obviously, Kyle. And this is part of that whole idea, like Greymane sending out Kyle instead of Relish is exactly that. And Kyle's magical sword draws attention. We have that battle going on there, where he does whatever he does to with the sword to the lady, and that needs to be healed magically. And we'll go to that in a second. It just, seeing this as one of the points where Greymane's failure to overcome the hurts of the past um, leads to actual like damage this time round. So let's move over to Ivana and the battles there and the death of Benneth and what is going on that side. So we see Ivana struggling with being a soldier because he's a warrior. He decided not to fight anymore. All of that stuff we've spoken about before. We'll come back to that again. We have that major battle with that Mara, whatever her name is. I keep forgetting names. I'm so bad. Martel, that's her name, the former Malazan and Greymane loyalist that is now in the army of the Reform, and her battle plan, which is very much a calculated battle plan, which sacrifices a lot of people, and so forth. But before that, we once again have magic, and we kind of get like a deeper look, and we spoke about that before, the Synod of Stig. Now we know what they're called, that group of magicians that are practicing magic, or not practicing magic, but at least knowing about magic, despite the Blessed Lady forbidding all kinds of magic, and they're helping out here. They have started to become active, and they have a traitor for all the wrong reasons, I guess. But that's how that works, and we're going to talk about that treachery thing in a second. I just wanted to point out that there is this like help from the underground. I really appreciate the way of Sister. I keep forgetting what her name is because she also gets killed immediately. Her being her knitting and her knitting being basically part of the magic with which she supports Benneth in his struggle against the lady, and then fails because brother Todson kills her, because he betrays everyone, because he thinks it's his right to lead the Synod of Stig, but because he's incapable of making any kind of decision, and through that wounded pride, he has sold out to the lady. Now, obviously, wounded pride is one of those things that make people traitors, or act irrationally in general. So this is not exactly a super surprising twist there. I just feel that when you look at how it is done really well, because we first meet that whole synod a couple chapters ago, and Todson, we kind of get it from Todson's point of view, sort of. And we see how the rest is just like actually treating him like shit. They may have reasons, one of them being him not wanting to act and whatnot, being super cautious. But they treat him like shit. So he has justified grudges against the others. It just goes into the wrong direction. Lets that go over for the lady, and we'll talk about the lady in a second as well. Anyway, Benneth dies, the battle is won, and Ivana is turned into his successor. We still need to figure out what that actually means in the near-ish future. But we see that things are getting more and more messy in Coral and Fist. So let's look at Ipshank, Manask. Manask being one of the coolest characters ever. Let's look at Ipshank, Manask, and Bakun doing their thing during the whole the Festival of Renewal, which shows us religious frenzy in all its brutality, and it's one of those things that religious acts are portrayed more often by Cam Asselmont than by Stephen Erickson. We've had similar things shown in Dance's Lament about the Festival of Burns. It seems like Cam Esselmond has a larger interest in religious rights than Stephen Erickson, maybe? Who knows? It's just an observation that this is what's happening there. Anyways, so during that, they prevent Ipshank's girl acolyte from being burned. They save her, and the Bloomeranths show up. And the Bloomeranth, that panics everyone. They go up to the casa, to the monastery, and there everyone is dead because we learn more about that goddess, the lady who just takes over things and then people and kills everyone because it is a very jealous goddess. Now that's not, not unheard of for gods to be jealous. It's just that she takes a more hands-on approach when it comes to showing her jealousy. Well, not that much compared to some stuff you can find in, say, the Old Testament, but still. Um, the point, though, is that we learn more about the fact that this is a very, a very powerful being that has assumed the role of deity, but still has very mundane concerns and plays on that whole idea of a connection between gods, goddesses, and deities and their worshippers, and that there is that is like a connection that goes into both directions, basically. We learned that the abbot was trying to control the goddess, which didn't work out. So she, she killed him and everyone else. So Bakun is suddenly in charge of the city because he's the highest-ranking official. He talks to the Malazans, which is Admiral Nock, and they are also beaten pretty badly after conquering Mare. So it's all about this pretense of strength and waiting for Greymane. So the whole endeavor is once again in jeopardy for all kinds of reasons. And I feel that's what makes this part, and also on the other side, the Storm Guard bits that we haven't yet spoken about, so interesting here. The way that Cam Asselmont manages to have all these different layers of problems. You have the religious problems with the cult of the lady. You have the political stuff going on with these different countries, different kingdoms or realms in Carl and Fist fighting each other or not supporting each other in a correct way, or in any way. You have these different layers of different invasions, one over the other. But they're all they all kind of lead back to some final event that created this sort of layered, knotted problem, if you want to call it a problem, because none of those conflicts can be solved without keeping the others in mind. And this is something that I guess we can take as our lesson for our world and our lives out of that. It's rarely that you can just fix one problem and then the next and then the next. They're all tangled up with each other. They're all intermingled in ways, and Asselmont makes that very clear and understandable. So yeah, we need to go to the storm wall for a second here as well. What we see at the storm wall, obviously, is once again Hyam's trying to do the best thing for him, for the storm guard, for the chosen ones of the storm guard, trying to save everyone. We're still talking about everyone, right? Because if the storm guard fails, the storm riders go and just take over the land, and everyone will die. So they're doing a good job. But we see that really well with Shell as a prisoner. It's they have very much lost a lot of their moral high ground through their practices of using, basically slaves and prisoners to fight their war for them. Which you also see a bit of that in the Night Watch with George R. Martin, but it's way more explicit and brutal in this one, I would say, the way it is portrayed. Thinking things through to their ultimate consequences in a way that we don't see in a lot of other fantasy. Now, and as I said, once again we come back to that question: is not acting the worst, the most evil thing you can do, and acting even though it may have, it may cost, even though it will very much cost people lives and whatnot. Is acting still better because at least you try to do something? So are the storm gods still on the side of good, even though they have lost the moral high ground, or are they like irredeemably evil at this point? Because on the other hand, they're also serving a goddess that may have, less than morally pure reasons for all the things she does. Well, we'll see. But yeah, we have the Storm Guard. We have the Crimson Guards. People show up there, become warriors. Also let themselves be sold there, which is one of those things that we see a lot of in either movies. It's one of the things that I've certainly seen happening in tabletop role-playing games a lot. It's one of those typical things like we disguise ourselves as prisoners so we get sold in there and then we can free our comrades. And that, well, we'll see how that works. I mean, we have the advantage that those people are just like also extremely good fighters because they're all avowed of the Crimson Guard and pretty fucking hard to kill. So that may actually help. Anyway, we see how the conflict within the Storm God, however, is like becoming more and more difficult because we have those three people, like the Protector of the Wall, Lord Protector Hyams, we have Wall Marshal Quince, and we have Chief Engineer Stimmons. And Quince, with his like focus on just martial prowess, has ignored the Chief Engineer. So there is still the risk of towers just crumbling and falling apart because no one was actually looking into infrastructure. Quick aside, infrastructure is important. You all know that. Our governments sometimes don't, which is why our highways are crumbling, our bridges are falling down, and we're basically fucked. At least we don't have to think hard about storm riders so far. But yeah. So we can see that pattern of like ignoring infrastructure. That is a thing that we see in a martial order, I would say. That's the big thing here, right? That the Storm Guard is a martial order. It's overtly masculine. We always hear that in like comments that there's way fewer women within the Storm Guard than in other armies, at least in higher ranks. So there's that. Why that is the case, we don't know yet, but they are overtly masculine. They are a warrior society that is very much built on, obviously, skill and focusing on martial skill. And if you do that to, like, the exclusion of everything else, you come to that point where you think that, strength in battle is all that counts, and the infrastructure is like less valuable. It has less prestige, and that may become the ruin of everyone. We'll see how that goes, but it's interesting to see that dynamic between those three leaders and how that leads to exploding tensions, like highly explosive tensions at this point, because the pressure, the outside, the external pressure is so high. We'll see how that goes in the next two chapters, I assume. So that'll be interesting. But it's also well done that we see how these military pressures, especially in the Storm Guard on the one hand, and in Greymane's army, on the other hand, are sort of mirroring each other, because we have that level of distrust with Greymane and Rillish, and we have it now between Hyams and Quince in the Storm Guard, which is once again a clever way to build to structure a novel, is to make sure that you have these like elements that echo each other in a way. And Cam Asselmont does this here in a good way. Now, where am I going with all of this? We didn't really look too much into what is going on in the Army of the Defenders, when they sent Usu and the Black Moranth back to Yale, the Overlord, and then the army obviously breaks because the envoy, Enish Ger, is an idiot. He's also one of the traitors of Greymane, so, we have that scene when he gets assassinated, and, but the point there is that we once again see that terrible command decisions and stupidity is one of the major things that will decide wars. Those mistakes are the main thing that will decide wars. If you have like well-trained people that know what they're doing, it's the fuck-ups of their commanders that will make shit worse, which once again puts the gray man into like a high, like a into a prodigious situation, because it's like, can he, overcome his like paranoia, or is he too far gone? Do we know? Will we know? Will we find out? Who knows? Um, I feel that the whole thing with Bakun is still interesting, because once again we see him trying to leave behind that very, very narrow view that he had before to become a more, like, you know, while keeping to his principles. It seems he's still doing so. Will he still manage to actually unravel? I mean, I guess he already knows what's going on, and there will be no justice. I feel that's like the terrible part. There will be no justice for all those kids, because unless Bakun actually manages to kill the lady, the blessed lady, and I guess that's a long line he has to get into to actually get that done, because he's not the only one who wants to see her gone at this point. Um, so, as a wrap up for those two chapters, tensions are mounting. Um, Treachery is certainly afoot, and we've come to that point where the war that we're fighting is no longer a war just against people, but it's very much at this point. I mean, it was kind of obvious from like a while ago, but it has become very clear that this is a war that will end with a fight against that power that is called the Blessed Lady, and that we will have to slay a god there, or someone will have to slay a god to free Coral and Fist for good. Will that work? What are the overall implications of that? I guess we'll find out on Monday and Tuesday. Until then, I wish y'all a happy weekend. Cheers.